Welcome to video 4, the fourth and final video in this series looking at the CSWE report on technology. My name is Dr. Jimmy Young. I'm a social work futurist and professor. I hope that you've been able to follow through with me up to this point in these videos. If not, feel free to go back to the first video where I take you through the report using a foresight and futures lens. In the first 3 videos, we really just established what the CSWE technology report is and why it matters. And I used a STEEP analysis to identify the key signals across 5 dimensions of the environment. I also built a 2x2 scenario matrix to give us 4 plausible futures for social work education. So in this video, I'm actually going to answer the most important question in the entire series: so what? What do programs actually do with all of this? So let's bring up the slides. But before I get to the strategic takeaways, I do want to spend a moment on this slide because I think it answers a question programs often ask, which is first, what specifically should students actually know? The report gives a framework for that, a competency framework that has 3 tiers. The first tier is foundational digital skills. It's the baseline. Things like digital literacy, which really is just the ability to navigate, evaluate, troubleshoot digital tools. Information literacy, which is the ability to identify algorithmic bias and evaluate digital information more critically. And also what the report calls technology-informed identity. It's an integration and understanding of technology into your professional values and practice. This tier is essentially the floor that every graduate of every program should have all of these skills, these foundational skills. The second tier is more practice integration competencies. This is where technology meets direct practice. Digital advocacy, using technology for social change and client empowerment. Technology-mediated service delivery, so the skills to engage and assess and intervene with clients through digital platforms. And digital documentation, so case management, electronic health records, data analytics for evaluating service outcomes. This tier is about being effective in the actual practice environments that our social work students are going to enter. The third tier is the technology leadership tier, and it's a tier that points toward the leading with values scenario that I was identified back in video 3. It's infrastructure development, or the ability to evaluate and support technology adoption in our agencies. It's strategic technology planning, or the capacity to anticipate emerging technologies and think about their policy implications. And what the report calls AI prompting, the skill of interacting effectively with AI systems to get useful, appropriate outputs in professional contexts. This tier is about shaping technology and not just using it. And I want to be honest about this framework. Most programs are currently doing some of Tier 1 inconsistently. Most programs are doing very little of Tier 2, and most programs are not doing Tier 3 very much at all. That gap is what the 2029 EPOS revisions is going to be designed to close. What are 4 things that programs must consider moving forward? Here, I think there's 4 key strategic takeaways from everything that I've covered. This includes things that I think programs need to genuinely wrestle with in response to this report. The first takeaway I see is that AI literacy is a baseline professional obligation. It's not an elective, it's not a specialization. The report says not preparing students is unethical. The practical implication is that AI and technology content need to come out of elective offerings and into our core curriculum. Not as a standalone technology course that students can forget about, but woven into ethics courses, practice courses, and policy courses. Students should be encountering technology questions in every domain of their professional education. The second takeaway is that field placements are a critical bottleneck. And this is the one that I think programs underestimate the most. You can build incredible technology content into your classroom curriculum and still produce graduates who can apply it, because their field placements didn't expose them to it in practice. So programs need to actively cultivate field sites that have or are building technology capacity. That means having explicit conversations with agency supervisors about technology expectations. It also means being selective about which sites you send students to for technology-related learning. And it also means being honest when field sites can't provide what students need. The third takeaway is that equity has to be the frame and not an afterthought. Everything we've learned from this report points to equity as a central concern. The clients that are most affected by AI-driven biases are the clients social work exists to serve. The students at under-resourced programs are the most exposed to unequal technology education. So the profession's commitment to social justice isn't separate from the technology conversation. It's the lens through which the technology conversation has to be conducted. Algorithmic bias is a social work issue. Digital exclusion is a social work issue. Surveillance of marginalized communities is a social work issue. The fourth takeaway is that the 2029 EPOS window is opening up. It's now. This is the one that I want to close in on because I think it's the most underappreciated strategic opportunity in the report. CSWE is actively building toward new accreditation standards, and programs that begin experimenting with technology integration today, that document what they're trying, what's working, what isn't working, they're going to have the evidence, the data, and a voice when those standards are being drafted. Programs that wait for the standards to arrive before acting are going to spend the next several years catching up to those requirements that have been ultimately written by others. The window is now open, but it's not going to stay open indefinitely. What I think the report also signals for 2029 and beyond is that this timeline puts a strategic window more in concrete terms. Where we are now, here at the left of this slide, is that the task force report has obviously been released, and CSWE has signaled, I think fairly loudly, that technology will be central to the 2029 EPOS. Apart from this report, you can also go and look at the new strategic mission and vision of CSWE, and one of their first goals is all about AI. That's another massive signal. So again, technology is going to be central in the EPOS moving forward. That's basically what I've spent these last 4 videos unpacking. 2026 to 2027 and 28, the EPOS drafting window is open. This is when the language of the new standards is going to be written, and CSWE will seek feedback from programs. And so programs that are experimenting now, building faculty development, they're piloting technology and competency frameworks, maybe revising field placement criteria, they're going to have the models and the evidence and the data relationships that give them a voice in those conversations and help steer and shape what those new standards might look like. Programs that are watching from the sidelines are just going to be responding to a finished document. I think in 2028, the EPOS will be getting finalized, the language will more or less be set, and the standards written, and so the opportunity to shape them is really going to be past. In 2029, that's when the EPOS will start to take effect. At that point, compliance will become required for programs. Every accredited program will need to demonstrate that it's meeting these standards. If your program hasn't started yet, 2029 is going to feel very close. And I want to be clear what this timeline means strategically. You have roughly a couple of years, 2026 and 27, to be a participant in this conversation rather than just a recipient of it. That's not a long time in the world of curriculum revision and institutional change. But it is enough time if you start now. It's not enough time if you sit back and wait. So I want to close this series with 4 questions, and they're really not rhetorical. They're the questions I think every program director or faculty member and field coordinator should be sitting with after spending time with this report. Where does technology currently live in your curriculum? And is that adequate? Not where does it technically appear in your course catalog, but where does it actually live in the learning experience of your students? Is it integrated across courses, or is it confined to one elective that a fraction of students take? Which field placement sites are already building technology capacity? You probably have some, but do they know who they are? Are you intentionally steering students toward them for technology-related learning? Are you having explicit conversations with those agencies about what the program may need? How are you preparing faculty to teach content they may not yet know? This is the question most programs tend to avoid. Faculty can't teach what they don't know. That's not a criticism, it's a structural reality. What does faculty development look like in your program around technology and more specifically AI? What would it need to look like? And finally, what position does your program want to hold in the new EPOS conversation? Because you have a choice. You can be a program that helps shapes the standards, or you can be a program that implements them. Both are legitimate choices, but they lead to very different experiences over the next few years, and they require very different starting points. So that's the series. 4 videos, Foresight tools that are applied to one report, and one central question. What does social work education need to do differently in response to what's coming? The CSWE technology report is not a comfortable document. It says the profession is behind. It says the gap between what's happening in the environment and what's happening in our programs is significant. It says the ethical stakes are real. And it says the window for shaping the response is open right now, but it's not going to stay open indefinitely. And I think that's a message that's worth taking seriously. I also think the Foresight tools that I've gone through together in this video series, the STEEP analysis, the scenario matrix, the prioritization bridge, and the Foresight cycle itself, give us a structured way to take it seriously rather than just feeling anxious about it. So if you're a social work educator, practitioner, and this series has been helpful to you, I'd really love to know what resonated and what questions it opened up for you. So drop something down in the comments, share the series with a colleague who might need to have this conversation. And if you're interested in going deeper, either on the Foresight tools or how to bring this kind of thinking into your classroom, I'll be building a lot more on my website and on these social channels in that direction. So thank you for watching, take care of yourselves, and let's build the future together.